Well, today I want to tell you a story. And the reason why I'm telling the story is because I kind of want to show people that the learning of the Ga language is not always smooth. And there can be stumbling blocks in the way, but they can be overcome. But also, I think this is a perfect example about watching what we say and the impact of what we say. The status of our language at the moment, I don't think we have the privilege of insulting and um, bringing down people who might not speak the language in the way we'd want them to speak it. So yeah, let me tell you what happened and what stopped me from speaking the Ga language in particular for many years. So from around 17, 18, I think, or maybe a little bit earlier, I started working at Voice of Africa Radio. Now, Voice of Africa Radio was the first legal FM station in London. And so we were very proud of that achievement. And I wanted to work on the station because I was very into media at that time. And because the person who owned the station was Ga, I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to learn and understand more Ga. And so after being there for a couple of years, I was now producer of a Ga program on Sunday, which was called Logoligi. And it was a very proud moment because if you know anything about the pirate stations at the time, it was not common for you to be hearing a lot of Ga programs. So I was really proud to be able to make this Ga program happen. So we had a presenter at the time who was there for a while, but then ended up having to go back to Ghana. And then the owner now took a while to do the show, but then wasn't able to commit. And so he ended up not leaving, but he ended up not being able to do the show. And for a few weeks, there was no Logoligi program because we couldn't find a Ga presenter. And then one day, this gorgeous, and I remember at that time, I was really in awe with her. Like I was at the start of my learning Ga journey. So I was horrendous at speaking Ga. I could barely string a sentence together. And this beautiful girl walked in and we connected straight away because one, I was really grateful that because of her, and she basically brought the Ga show back on air. Because of her, we were able to have the Logoligi program. And one of the things that also struck me about her and I really admired is that she left Ghana really young. She had loads of different cultural heritages. Ghana was one of them. I think she had a bit of Dutch in her and some other stuff, ethnicity. And so she left Ghana when she was really young. So her Ga, although a million times better than mine, was not the Ga of somebody who stayed in Ghana till adulthood and continued talking until they came here. But her Ga was way better than mine. And so her story inspired me because she was encouraging me to speak the Ga, to try my best to learn. She was giving me some tips and she was giving me some advice. So we really connected. Like I really, like the way I felt about her was an admiration, like a big sis. She was really encouraging me and she was doing her bit. She knew that her Ga was not 100%. Personally, I thought it was like 70%. I really thought her Ga was amazing. And she decided that with what she knows to keep the Ga program on air, she is going to do the show. I was like, great. So I was so happy and we started the show and I was just admiring how she was handling it. And we do a live call section. And the first caller came in. Nike Daniel yo kra ke oni eni oye gan jugba remo bluffo. I was like, what? Okay, and then we just cut the call, but I can see her demeanor now changed. From that bubbly girl that she was, her demeanor had now changed. And then the next call came in, and I always get emotional telling the story because just to see the comments that came from people and what it did to her and what it did to me listening to her. The next call came in. And then again, we hung up. And she was completely deflated by this point. And so was I. And so we decided that when the calls come in, so they don't go live, we'll take them off air. I think a third call came in, again, insulting her Ga and essentially saying that her Ga was so bad. And for me, her Ga was amazing. I wanted to be like her. Essentially saying her Ga was so bad, it is better for her to speak English than to speak this backwards Ga. And it was really interesting because the three that did call were of a particular gender, and then the two that called later were of another gender, but I won't, And then somebody hearing what had been said on air, and the damage it caused the girl, and me observing that because I was admiring this girl. I wanted to speak like this girl. And this is what the community was saying to her. So in my mind, I'm like, what would they say to me? If they are saying that they'd rather hear her speak English than destroy the girl, as that's how they put it, what would they say to me? Because I thought her girl was amazing. She was doing something to help the community. And and this is the thing, that when they were making those comments, they most likely didn't care what they were doing to her. They didn't realize that somebody behind her, which was me, was also listening and hearing what they were saying, and it was going to affect my journey to learning Ga. I know at that time, because there was very few Ga radio stations, families will put it on to encourage their children to speak Ga. Those children are also now hearing what the community is saying. So the next two calls that came in basically encouraged us, said, don't mind what they're saying. You're doing brilliant. You're doing an amazing job. We appreciate you. And as much as that happened, and I'm so grateful for those people who did that, the damage was already done. The girl didn't come back, and I haven't seen her since. And at that point, I then decided that I was not going to speak Ga for a few years. And the reason why I decided that was because if the community will treat this girl the way they treated her, despite her Ga being 100 times better, I just felt that they'll rip me into pieces. And at that time, I was a very sensitive people pleaser kind of person. And so I didn't want to do things that will make people upset. And I had determined at that point that me speaking backwards Ga will make people upset. And for a good few years, I went about, and my journey to learning Ga kind of ended. It changed when maybe about 3-4 years later, I then realized, I don't know whether I'd heard someone speaking Ga, real good Ga, and then I realized that those three people that called in at the radio station had basically robbed me of 4 years of learning. And had they not done that, I probably would be fluent by now. And I'd reasoned in my head at that time that I cannot allow these people to destroy my journey to speaking Ga. I cannot allow these people to take away my heritage and culture. Because if they take that away from me, they will take that away from the children that I will have. And then the Ga ends with my mum. So I then went back onto my journey to learning Ga. But for a good few years, to be honest, at the time, it was easier to not speak Ga, because the expectation is if you're born and raised abroad and you don't speak Ga, that's standard practice. I understood it, which was much to the surprise of people. But if I don't speak it, it wasn't a surprise. And for a lot of people, that again, because when I speak Ga, you speak to me in Ga, I translate it to English, and I translate it back into Ga, and I speak it back out to you. I'm not as quick in responding, and some people didn't have the patience. I was already aware of this. So it was easy for me. Those 3 years were easy because I surprised people that I understood it. And if I replied back in English, it was like, they might say one or two things, but then we just continue our conversation. It was much harder to try and continue the conversation in Ga. And I had decided that I'm not going to allow these people to rob me. Those people that called and did what they did have no idea that even 20 years later, that story still upsets me. What had happened still upsets me. What it did to that girl upsets me. Me observing that. And it was, I was still learning production at that time. So I shouldn't have taken any of the calls live straight away. But we had never had a situation where people would do what they did. And then I didn't expect it to happen again. So my thing is, watch what you say to people. You don't know the impact that you're going to have on people. Be encouraging. We are not a group that can be dismissive of people learning Ga, because we are in a delicate balance right now. So the privilege that some people might have in being very disrespectful about people learning Ga, we don't have that privilege. And so we have to be encouraging. I'm not going to lie, the way I speak Ga sometimes, because It's Ga with a very English accent. Like I remember one time ni Mukuye ni Unake Viole with a Hausa accent. I found it so interesting. So I completely understand that. But there's ways to be respectful about it and not completely demean the person's character. So I wanted to tell you that story because again, learning Ga for me hasn't always been easy. I've had very difficult times. Even a few years ago, I had a Ga chair basically publicly have a few words to say in front of a big audience about how I spoke Ga. So it still happens till this day, and people don't know how it affects people. I went home, and I'm bored in front of, and when I was there, I was so angry, I wanted to cry. But when I got home with my mum, and then I just started, how it is, no matter how big you are, when you're around your mum, you kind of like, so it has been a difficult journey. And one of the reasons why I do the work I do is to almost cut that layer away so that people can have a smoother, more pleasant journey in learning Ga. I do not believe that people have to go through what I went through when learning the culture and the heritage. And I've tried as much as possible to make that journey smoother. And I hope I have somewhat done that. I've still got a lot of work to do. But for the community that are fluent in Ga and can speak Ga very well, watch what you say to people and how you say it. If you have power, do not use that power to bring someone down and basically swipe the rug from under their feet. Use that power to encourage them, to grow them, to develop them. Because if they can speak Ga, you don't know what else they could achieve. I am a random person from the UK. I didn't know much about the culture, but I've been able to do a few things. If you encourage the people around you, imagine what they can do in terms of elevating both the Ga and the Dangme culture. So I thought I'd just tell you that story about why I didn't speak Ga for a few years and what had happened. And I hope we learn a few lessons from it and don't repeat it for others, because it is very painful, especially when you're very passionate and really want to connect with your community. We really have to be careful with what we say.